All carry-on items go in the overhead bins. No exceptions. The words weren't a suggestion. They were a command delivered with the kind of crisp finality that left no room for debate. Brenda Walsh stood in the galley of the Gulfstream G65. Arms crossed over her designer blazer, her sharp blue eyes fixed on the scuffed black backpack like it was a piece of garbage waiting to be removed. Zara Williams looked up at her, calm but firm. "I understand, but this isn't a regular carry-on." Mr. Donovan's assistant confirmed there's a secure storage compartment for sensitive equipment. "This bag contains my research project. It's very fragile." Brenda's perfectly glossed lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft, miss. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what belongs in this cabin and what doesn't. That bag goes overhead, or I'll stow it for you myself." The tension in the air was immediate, thick, suffocating. Zara clutched the straps of her backpack a little tighter. Inside that worn fabric and scuffed nylon was 2 years of her life. Inside was BioWave, a revolutionary water purification system using bioengineered microorganisms to break down pollutants at a molecular level. Inside were interconnected cylinders, custom foam padding data drives with irreplaceable research notes, and a prototype insured for $2.3 million. Inside was her future. But Brenda Walsh wasn't looking at a brilliant scientist. She was looking at a 24-year-old black woman in jeans and a hoodie standing in a world of marble floors and cream leather seats, and she had already decided Zara didn't belong. "I can't let this bag out of my sight," Zara said, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Everything is in here, my entire project. If something happens to it..." Brenda cut her off with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand. "This aircraft has standards, miss. Your bag doesn't meet them." The words hung in the air like a slap. Before we dive into what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged before anyone even knew your name? Have you ever walked into a room and felt the weight of someone's assumptions before you even opened your mouth? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. And if you believe karma is real, if you believe that people who underestimate others eventually pay the price, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because you're about to witness the most satisfying turnaround of the year. Now let's rewind and see how Zara Williams ended up standing in that luxury cabin about to have her life's work thrown away by a woman who had no idea what she was about to lose. 30 minutes earlier, Zara had walked through the exclusive terminal at Venice Airport with her 2 teammates Connor Hayes and Elena Rodriguez. Connor, 26, white, with perpetually nervous energy, and a talent for coding that bordered on genius, carried a laptop bag and kept glancing around like he expected someone to tell them they were in the wrong place. Elena, 25. Hispanic, sharp-tongued, and fiercely protective, had her arms full of documents and wore an expression that dared anyone to question their presence. "This is insane," Connor whispered as they approached the gleaming private jet on the tarmac. "I still can't believe Mr. Donovan arranged all this. He said we needed to arrive rested and with the project secure," Zara replied, adjusting the straps of her backpack. "No commercial flight, no baggage handlers, no risk of BioWave getting lost or damaged." Elena nodded. "Smart. That prototype is our one shot. No backup, no spare. If anything happens to it, we're done." Zara's fingers brushed the small, beaded keychain dangling from the zipper, a tiny lizard her 8-year-old sister had made for her before she left. "For good luck," her sister had said. "You're going to change the world, Zara." She hoped her sister was right. Marcus Donovan, the tech philanthropist who had discovered Zara's work at the National Science Expo and immediately pledged his foundation's support, had arranged everything. The private charter, the direct flight to Zurich for the Global Innovation Summit, the 5-star accommodations. He believed in BioWave. He believed in Zara. And he had told her in his calm, reassuring voice that this trip would change her life. He was right about that. but not in the way any of them expected. As they boarded the Gulfstream, Zara felt a flicker of unease. Standing at the top of the stairs was Brenda Walsh. Blonde hair pulled into a sleek bun, tailored navy blazer, hugging her frame a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. She scanned the three of them. Jeans, hoodies, worn sneakers, and something shifted in her expression. Disapproval, disdain, judgment. "Welcome aboard, Brenda," said her voice smooth but cold. She glanced at the charter confirmation on Elena's phone, her eyes catching on the name, the Donovan Foundation. Recognition flickered. Money. Serious money. But her gaze drifted back to Zara, to the plain clothes and the scuffed backpack, and the pieces didn't fit in Brenda's carefully ordered world. "Right this way," she said, turning sharply on her heel. And that's when everything started to fall apart. The interior of the Gulfstream G650 was a masterpiece of luxury. Cream-colored leather seats, polished mahogany accents, soft ambient lighting that made everything glow with warmth. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh coffee. It was the kind of space that whispered wealth in every detail, from the Egyptian cotton hand towels in the lavatory to the crystal glassware stacked neatly in the galley. Connor let out a low whistle. "This is unreal." Elena's jaw had dropped. "I've seen pictures, but this is insane," Connor finished. Zara barely noticed. Her focus was singular, unwavering. She needed to find the secure storage compartment Mr. Donovan's assistant had mentioned in the pre-flight briefing. BioWave couldn't go in an overhead bin. The cylinders were delicate. The system required stable temperature and pressure. One hard jolt, one careless toss, and 2 years of work could be destroyed. She approached Brenda, who was now standing by the galley inspecting a clipboard with the kind of meticulous attention that suggested she took her role very, very seriously. "Excuse me," Zara said politely. "Could you show me where the secure forward storage is? I have sensitive research equipment in my bag that needs to be properly stowed." Brenda looked up, her blue eyes doing a slow, deliberate scan of Zara's backpack. It was standard issue, the kind you'd see on any college campus. Black nylon, a few scuff marks on the bottom, a small tear near the side pocket that Zara had duct-taped months ago. The beaded lizard keychain dangled from the main zipper, bright and childish and completely out of place in this world of polished perfection. To Brenda, it looked cheap. It looked out of place. It looked like clutter. "All carry-on items can be placed in the overhead compartments," Brenda stated, her voice losing its feigned warmth and taking on a crisp, dismissive edge. "I understand," Zara said, her tone patient but insistent. "But this isn't a typical carry-on. It contains a delicate scientific prototype. Mr. Donovan's team specifically arranged for secure storage. There should be a designated closet near the cockpit. The mention of Mr. Donovan's name should have been a red flag. Should have been a warning." But Brenda's prejudice was a fog that clouded her judgment. She saw a young black woman in plain clothes questioning her authority on her aircraft. It was a challenge she felt compelled to meet. "I am perfectly aware of the storage compartments on this aircraft," Miss Brenda said, her voice dropping to a low, condescending tone. That she gestured dismissively toward Zara's bag with a flick of her wrist can go overhead. "Or I can take it and stow it for you." The offer was laced with an unspoken threat. There was finality in her tone, a clear signal that the conversation was over. Connor and Elena exchanged a nervous glance. They had seen this before. The subtle, dismissive behavior directed at Zara. The assumptions made before anyone bothered to ask questions. But never in a situation with stakes this high. "With all due respect," Zara said, her voice calm but firm, "I'd feel much more comfortable keeping it with me until I can place it in the secure locker myself. This project is irreplaceable. It's worth over $2 million. Brenda's patience, already thin, snapped. "We have a departure schedule to keep, miss. We cannot delay takeoff while we debate the sentimental value of your luggage." The way she said luggage was an insult, stripping the backpack of its significance, reducing it to mere inconvenience. Zara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. This was going wrong. Terribly wrong. This woman wasn't listening. She wasn't seeing a scientist. She was seeing a problem. And in that moment, Zara made a decision. She would stand her ground. This was too important. "I'm not debating," Zara said quietly, but her voice carried weight. "I'm stating a fact. My project needs to be secured properly. I will wait for Mr. Donovan to arrive if necessary. He can confirm the arrangements." The challenge was now explicit. Brenda's face, a mask of professional courtesy just moments before, hardened into a granite slab of fury. How dare this girl on her plane? In front of the other crew, the injustice in Brenda's mind was monumental, and the object of her fury became the simple black backpack, the symbol of everything that felt wrong and out of place in her carefully controlled world. It was a symbol she was about to remove. Behind them, near the rear galley, stood Lily Martinez, the junior flight attendant. 23 years old, only 6 months into her dream job with Apex Air. Lily had watched the exchange with growing unease. She had seen the way Brenda looked at Zara. She had heard the condescension in her senior's voice, and every instinct told her this was wrong. But Lily was new, replaceable, and Brenda Walsh had been with Apex for 2 decades. Brenda had power. Brenda had seniority. Brenda could end Lily's career with a single complaint. So Lily stayed silent. Connor, however, did not. He stepped forward, his voice louder than usual, emboldened by indignation. "Miss Walsh, she's explained how important this is. Can't you just check with someone? Verify the storage arrangements." Brenda turned her cold gaze on him. "Young man, if you interrupt me one more time, I will have all 3 of you removed from this aircraft before we even push back. Do I make myself clear?" Connor's face flushed. Elena grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Zara stood alone, her backpack still slung over her shoulder, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside that bag was BioWave. Inside were cylinders, no bigger than water bottles filled with a solution of genetically modified microorganisms that could filter toxins from contaminated water sources. It was elegant. It was revolutionary. It was the culmination of 2 years of relentless research, countless failed experiments, sleepless nights in the university lab. It was the reason Marcus Donovan had chartered this jet. The reason they were flying to Zurich. The reason Zara had been invited to present at the Global Innovation Summit in front of environmental scientists, investors, and policymakers from around the world. It was her one shot to change the world. And Brenda Walsh, standing in her designer blazer, with her perfectly manicured nails and her sharp, judgmental eyes, saw none of that. She saw a scuffed backpack. She saw a young woman who didn't fit. She saw something that didn't belong, and she was about to throw it all away. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted. The air felt heavier, charged with tension that crackled like static electricity before a storm. Zara stood her ground, her fingers wrapped tightly around the straps of her backpack, knuckles white with the strain. Across from her, Brenda Walsh radiated controlled fury. Her jaw set her blue eyes ice cold, waiting for Mr. "Donovan is not an option?" Brenda said, her voice sharp and brittle. "We are on a strict departure schedule. The pilots have filed their flight plan. We push back in 10 minutes with or without Mr. Donovan on board. Now give me the bag." It wasn't a request. It was a command underpinned by 20 years of unchallenged authority over this domain. Zara's pulse hammered in her ears. "No," she said quietly. "I can't." Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. "Excuse me, I can't give you the bag." Zara repeated, her voice trembling slightly but laced with steel. "Everything is in here. The prototype, the data drives, my research notes. It's not just a bag. It's my entire project. Elena stepped forward, her voice sharp with outrage. She told you how important this is. We all did. You can't just take someone's property. Brenda's gaze snapped to Elena. I will not be lectured on procedure by children who clearly don't understand how private aviation works. Children! Connor's voice boomed through the cabin louder than anyone had ever heard him speak. We're scientists. We were invited here. This flight was chartered specifically for us. Brenda's smile was thin and cruel. Then perhaps you should have dressed the part. The insult hung in the air, naked and ugly. Lily Martinez, standing near the rear galley, felt her stomach turn. She wanted to say something, wanted to step forward and tell Brenda this was wrong, but fear rooted her in place. Fear of losing her job, fear of being blacklisted, fear of Brenda's wrath. Zara's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. You don't know anything about me, she said, her voice low and steady. You looked at me and made a judgment. You decided I don't belong here. But you're wrong. Brenda took a step closer, her presence looming and insistent. I have had quite enough of this, she declared. The item you're carrying is unstowed and poses a potential hazard during takeoff. My decision is final and in the interest of safety. You will hand over the bag, or you will be removed from this aircraft. Safety. Elena scoffed. You're making this about safety. You just don't like that she's standing up to you. One more word, Brenda hissed, and you're all off this flight. Connor pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. I'm recording this, he said. For the record. People need to see what's happening here. Brenda's eyes flicked to the phone. Record whatever you want, she said with icy confidence. It won't change the outcome. I have the authority here. Not you. Zara involuntarily took a step back, bumping into one of the plush leather seats. The backpack shifted on her shoulder, and she instinctively wrapped both arms around it, holding it close to her chest. You're not taking this, she said, her voice breaking. Please, just wait for Mr. Donovan. He'll explain everything. Brenda's patience was gone, obliterated. She saw defiance where Zara felt desperation. She saw insolence where Zara was trying to protect her future. To Brenda, this wasn't about a fragile research project. It was about a young woman who didn't know her place. And the backpack was the symbol of that defiance. A scuffed, ordinary object that represented everything Brenda found offensive. I am giving you one final opportunity, Brenda said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Hand over the bag or I will remove it myself. Zara's breath hitched. You can't do that. That's theft. Brenda's lips curled into a cold smile. It's enforcement of safety regulations. Connor stepped forward, positioning himself between Brenda and Zara. You're not touching her, he said firmly. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Move aside or you will be forcibly removed by security. Elena joined Connor, standing shoulder to shoulder with him. You're threatening us. On camera. Brenda's composure finally cracked. She raised her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft. I have the authority to remove any passenger who poses a safety risk or refuses to comply with crew instructions. You, she pointed at Zara, are both. And I am done negotiating with someone who clearly doesn't understand how things work here. The words were laced with contempt, with dismissal, with a clear message. You don't belong. Zara felt the weight of it all crashing down. The judgment, the assumptions, the refusal to see her as anything other than a problem to be solved. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, spent countless nights in the lab running tests, perfecting the system, dreaming of the moment she would present BioWave to the world. And now a woman who knew nothing about her, nothing about her work, nothing about what was inside that bag was treating it, and her like trash. Tears finally spilled down Zara's cheeks. "You're wrong about me," she whispered. "You're so wrong." Brenda's face was a mask of stone. "I don't think I am." And then she moved. It happened so fast that no one had time to react. Brenda didn't try to wrench the bag from Zara's arms. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, with a practiced dismissive motion, she reached out, grabbed the top handle of the backpack and gave it a sharp, sudden yank. The bag slipped from Zara's grip. No Zara cried out, lunging forward, but Brenda was already turning away, the backpack dangling from her hand like a piece of refuse. She walked briskly toward the galley, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Connor's phone was still recording. Elena stood frozen in shock. Lily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Zara stumbled forward, her voice breaking. "Please don't. Please, I'm begging you." Brenda didn't look back. She reached the galley where the gleaming coffee machine and neatly stacked crystal glasses reflected the cabin lights. Next to them was a small, discreet silver door, the waste disposal chute, designed for the efficient removal of trash during flight. A sleek one-way portal that led directly to an exterior refuse container emptied by ground crew after every flight. In Brenda's mind, clouded by prejudice and wounded pride, that's exactly what the backpack was. Trash. Clutter. An unsightly object marring the perfection of her cabin. Brenda, no. Lily's voice finally broke through, sharp and desperate, but it was too late. Brenda Walsh held the black backpack over the open chute. Her fingers, adorned with a large sapphire ring, gripped the fabric with contempt. And then, with a final dismissive shove, she pushed it through the opening. The silver door swung shut with a soft, metallic click. It was a sound that echoed in the silent cabin like a gunshot, a sound that signified the obliteration of Zara's dream. The bag was gone. For 5 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the faint electronic hum of the aircraft and the distant whine of another jet taxiing on the tarmac outside. Connor stood with his mouth agape, his phone still recording his face, a mask of utter disbelief. Elena let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily Martinez looked pale and sick. Her eyes locked on the closed silver door, and Zara just stood there frozen. Her hands were still outstretched, reaching for the backpack that was no longer there, grasping at empty air. Her mind couldn't process it. The intricate network of cylinders, the living microorganisms, the data drives with 2 years of irreplaceable research, the prototype worth $2.3 million. All of it gone, discarded like a used napkin, thrown away. My project? Zara whispered the words, barely audible. Then louder, her voice cracking with desperation. My project. You threw away my project. She lunged toward the galley, her hands scrambling at the smooth, featureless chute door. There was no handle, no latch, no way to open it from the inside. It was designed to be a one-way trip. Get it back, she cried, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. She spun on Brenda, her eyes blazing with a mixture of disbelief and fury. You have to get it back. Now! Brenda, however, was unmoved. She crossed her arms, adopting the posture of a headmistress dealing with a hysterical child. Calm yourself, miss. What's done is done. It was an unauthorized item, and I disposed of it. You were causing a scene and delaying our flight. A scene. Connor's voice, usually quiet and hesitant, boomed through the cabin. He had found his courage fueled by pure outrage. She told you how important it was. We all did. That wasn't just a bag. That was 2 years of work. Our entire reason for being on this flight. Our chance to present at the Global Innovation Summit. Elena, recovering from her initial shock, rushed to Zara's side, wrapping a comforting arm around her shaking shoulders. "You can't just throw people's property away," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with indignation. "That's not just unprofessional. It's theft. It's destruction of property." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. But Brenda Walsh had been in this industry for 20 years. She had weathered complaints from entitled billionaires and temperamental celebrities. She was an expert at deflecting, at diminishing, at seizing control of the narrative. She had a story ready. "I will not be lectured on procedure by children," she said, her voice like ice. The item was unstowed and posed a potential hazard during takeoff. My decision was final and in the interest of safety. I followed protocol. She was already constructing the lie. The official version of events that would paint her as the responsible professional and Zara as the unruly passenger who refused to comply. "Safety." Elena's voice was incredulous. "You're seriously claiming that was about safety?" "Yes," Brenda said firmly. "Unstowed items can become projectiles during turbulence or an emergency landing. I acted to protect all passengers on board." Connor's phone was still recording. The live stream he'd started when the confrontation began was now showing the video to over 3,000 viewers. The chat was exploding. Did she just throw it away? Someone call Apex Air. Right now. This is insane. That woman needs to be fired. You're on live stream, Connor said, his voice shaking with anger. Thousands of people just watched you throw away a scientist's research. You're done. Brenda's eyes flicked to the phone again, and for a brief moment a shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. But pride, stubborn and inflexible, pushed it away. "I don't care who's watching," she said coldly. "I did my job." The conflict had drawn the full attention of Lily Martinez, the junior flight attendant who had been trying to make herself invisible at the back of the plane. She had witnessed everything: the condescension, the refusal to listen, the malice, and now the desperate aftermath. Her conscience screamed at her to speak up, to tell the truth, to say that Brenda's actions had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with prejudice. But fear held her tongue. "You saw what she did," Zara pleaded, turning to Lily, her voice dropping to a desperate reasoning tone. She pointed a trembling finger at the junior attendant. Tell her to get it back. You know this wasn't about safety." Lily opened her mouth to speak. The words were right there, ready to spill out. But then Brenda shot her a look. It was a glance of pure, unadulterated warning. A look that said, "You are new here. You are replaceable. Your career is in my hands. Say nothing." The message was as clear as if it had been shouted. Lily's face paled. She looked from Brenda's granite-hard expression to Zara's desperate, pleading eyes. The internal battle played out in seconds. Self-preservation won. She dropped her gaze to the plush carpeting, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "All passengers need to be seated for takeoff." She mumbled the words automatic, devoid of conviction. She turned quickly and busied herself with checking the window shades, her back to the confrontation. Her hands were shaking. Her silence was a second, sharper betrayal. It was a confirmation that in this gilded cage the rules were different. Truth was secondary to hierarchy. Justice was secondary to job security. Zara felt a profound sense of hopelessness wash over her. No one would help. No one would stand up to Brenda. They were trapped in this aircraft with a woman who held all the power and had just wielded it with casual cruelty. She sank into the nearest seat, the fight draining out of her. The tears she had been holding back began to flow freely now, hot and bitter. It was all gone. The delicate microorganisms probably already crushed under the weight of other refuse. The data drives her only backup of raw experimental data smashed beyond recovery. The custom-built prototype irreplaceable without thousands of dollars and months of painstaking work. Gone. thrown away by a woman who hadn't even bothered to ask what was inside. Brenda, seeing Zara's tears, saw capitulation, saw victory. She gave a curt, satisfied nod. "Good," she said briskly. "Now, if there are no more outbursts, we can get underway." She turned to walk toward the cockpit to inform the pilots they were ready for pushback. She felt a surge of triumph. She had faced a challenge to her authority and had won unequivocally. The cabin was quiet. The troublemaker subdued. Order was restored. As she passed down the aisle, her heels clicking with authority, she failed to notice the small red light still blinking on Connor's laptop, which he had opened on the seat beside him. The live stream was still running. Over 5,000 people were watching now. The comments were a torrent of outrage. Connor had activated the stream the moment Brenda had first confronted Zara. He had captured everything. Brenda's condescending tone, Zara's calm, desperate pleas, the clear, undeniable malice of the act itself, and most damningly Lily's terrified silence. The truth hadn't been thrown away with the backpack. It had been recorded, documented, broadcasted to thousands. Brenda Walsh had no idea that she had just destroyed her own life in front of a live audience. Connor leaned over to Zara, his voice low but urgent. "We have everything he whispered. Every second. Every word. She's not getting away with this." Zara looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, her eyes hollow with grief. "It doesn't matter," she said quietly. "BioWave is gone. We have nothing to present. It's over." Elena gripped her hand tightly. "It's not over," she said fiercely. "We'll make her pay for this." But Zara couldn't hear her, couldn't feel hope. All she could feel was the crushing weight of loss. And in the cockpit, Brenda Walsh was informing Captain Ryan Mitchell that the cabin was secure for departure, completely unaware that in exactly 4 minutes, her entire world would come crashing down. Captain Ryan Mitchell, a 52-year-old veteran pilot with 30 years of flying experience, and a face weathered by countless hours in the cockpit, looked up from his pre-flight checklist when Brenda entered. He had the calm, steady demeanor of someone who had seen it all and was rarely surprised by anything. "Cabin secure?" he asked without looking up. "Secured." Brenda confirmed, her voice crisp and professional. "Minor issue with a passenger, but it's been resolved. We're ready for pushback." Captain Mitchell nodded, reaching for the radio to contact ground control. "Apex 650 requesting clearance for pushback stand 9. But before the ground controller could respond, the main cabin door, which Brenda had sealed just moments before, hissed open with a pneumatic sigh. A blast of warm California air and the distant whine of jet engines filled the cabin. Framed in the doorway was a man in his late 50s, dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit. He had a kind, weary face, sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of quiet authority that needed no introduction. It was Marcus Donovan. "My apologies for the delay," he said, his voice calm and resonant as he stepped aboard, closing the door behind him. "Last-minute call I couldn't avoid." He paused, his keen eyes immediately sensing the wrong atmosphere in the cabin. The tension was palpable, hanging in the air like smoke. He saw Connor staring intently at his laptop screen, his jaw clenched. He saw Elena with her arm protectively around someone. And then he saw Zara slumped in a seat near the window, her face streaked with tears, her eyes staring blankly at nothing. Marcus's brow furrowed with immediate concern. "Zara," he said, walking quickly toward her. "What's wrong? What happened?" Before anyone could answer, Brenda intercepted him, her professional smile snapping back into place like a mask. "Mr. Donovan," she said smoothly, "welcome aboard. We've had a small issue with one of our passengers. A bit of an emotional outburst about carry-on storage, but everything is under control now. Please take your seat so we can depart on schedule." She tried to gently steer him toward the forward cabin, away from the students, away from the truth. It was a calculated move, an attempt to control the narrative before it spiraled. It was also the worst mistake she could have made. Marcus Donovan was not a man to be guided or managed. His focus was entirely on the young woman he had personally mentored for the past 8 months. The brilliant scientist whose work he believed could change the world. The person he had chartered this $500,000 flight for. He pulled away from Brenda's touch, his expression hardening. Emotional, he repeated, his voice losing its warmth. He looked directly at Zara. "Zara, talk to me. What happened?" Zara looked up, and the sight of her mentor, her champion, the man who had believed in her when no one else had, broke the fragile dam of her composure. A fresh wave of sobs shook her shoulders. She threw it away. Zara choked out, pointing a trembling finger toward the galley. "My backpack. BioWave. Everything." She threw it in the trash chute. For a moment, Marcus didn't move. His face went through a rapid cascade of emotions. Confusion as if he hadn't heard correctly, then disbelief as his mind tried to process the words, then a cold, hardening fury that turned his kind features into something formidable. He slowly turned his head and stared at Brenda Walsh. It was a look that could have frozen fire. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You did what Marcus asked," his voice dangerously quiet. Brenda's smile faltered. For the first time, a sliver of unease pierced her armor of self-assurance. "Sir," she began, her voice losing its crispness. The passenger was refusing to stow an oversized carry-on item. It was a safety issue. "I made a decision in the interest of her backpack." Marcus interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "The black backpack with the beaded lizard keychain. Where is it?" Brenda's face went pale. How could he possibly know such a specific, insignificant detail? Why would a man of his stature care about a cheap keychain? "Yes, sir," she stammered. "It was a simple bag. The passenger was being uncooperative, and I disposed of it in accordance with safety protocols." That simple bag, Marcus said, his voice now echoing with barely controlled rage, contains a water purification prototype insured for $2.3 million. It contains the culmination of 2 years of research. It contains technology that could provide clean drinking water to millions of people in developing nations. He took a step closer to her, his quiet demeanor completely gone, replaced by an aura of immense power and indignation. "Its contents are patent pending. Its creator has been invited to present at the Global Innovation Summit in Zurich, and I chartered this specific aircraft with its specific secure storage accommodations for the sole purpose of transporting that bag and the 3 young scientists who created it safely to Switzerland." Another step. This jet, Miss Walsh. This entire plane. It wasn't chartered for me. He pointed directly at Zara, who was watching through her tears, unable to believe what she was hearing. It was chartered for her. The words hit Brenda Walsh like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Her mind, so quick to judge and categorize, struggled desperately to reassemble the facts. The cheap clothes, the scuffed backpack, the black woman she had dismissed as someone who didn't belong, and the multimillionaire tech philanthropist declaring that this entire opulent world of private aviation had been arranged specifically for her. It was impossible. It defied everything Brenda understood about order, about hierarchy, about who belonged in spaces like this. Her face, which had been flushed with righteous authority, drained of all color. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The lie she had been constructing, the story about safety protocols and uncooperative passengers, crumbled to dust. There was no procedure that justified what she had done. There was no rule that gave her the right to throw away a passenger's property. She hadn't been enforcing regulations. She had been acting on petty, ugly prejudice, and she had done so in front of the one person who could make her pay the ultimate price. "You threw a revolutionary scientific prototype into the garbage," Marcus said, his voice now laced with a chilling, incredulous calm. He looked past her at the innocuous silver chute door. You discarded 2 years of groundbreaking research because you decided based on nothing but your own assumptions that it looked like trash. I didn't know. Brenda stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It looked like a regular backpack. She was refusing to follow instructions. "Get it back," Marcus commanded, his voice cutting through her excuses like a blade. Brenda stared at him, her blue eyes wide with dawning horror. I can't," she said, her voice breaking. It's a sealed refuse container. It can only be opened by the ground crew from the outside. It's company policy. Then get the ground crew." Marcus commanded, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Tell the captain to stop this aircraft. Tell him to get ground personnel out here right now and open that container." He stepped even closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You have 60 seconds to make that happen, Miss Walsh. Or I will not only ensure that you never work on another aircraft again, I will personally fund the lawsuit that takes your house, your pension, and everything you have ever owned. Do you understand me?" The threat was not idle hyperbole. It was a promise delivered with the cold precision of someone who had the resources and the will to follow through. The facade of the powerful, experienced senior flight attendant shattered completely. In its place stood a terrified woman who was just beginning to comprehend the magnitude of her mistake. She hadn't just thrown away a backpack. She had thrown away her entire future, her career, her security, her life. With a strangled, choked sound, Brenda turned and practically ran toward the cockpit, her carefully composed world collapsing around her with every step. The silence she left in her wake was profound, broken only by Zara's quiet, shuddering breaths and the faint sound of Connor's livestream chat absolutely exploding with messages. Over 10,000 people were watching now. Marcus walked over to Zara and knelt beside her seat. "They're getting it back," he said softly, his hand on her shoulder. "It's going to be okay. I promise you." Zara looked at him, her eyes red and swollen. "I thought it was gone," she whispered. "It's not gone," Marcus said firmly. "And he gestured toward the cockpit where Brenda had fled, is going to answer for what she did." In the cockpit, Brenda burst through the door, startling Captain Mitchell and his co-pilot. Her face was ashen, her hands shaking. "We have an emergency," she gasped. "We need ground crew, now. The refuse container. It has to be opened immediately." Captain Mitchell looked up confused. "What?" "Why, there's a bag in there. A passenger's bag. It was disposed of by mistake. Mr. Donovan is demanding it be retrieved." "By mistake?" Captain Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "Brenda, what did you do?" She couldn't answer, couldn't form the words. Captain Mitchell, a man who had flown dignitaries, celebrities, and heads of state, recognized a crisis when he saw one. He grabbed his radio. "Ground crew. This is Apex 650 at Stand 9. We have a priority situation. I need a maintenance team at the aft service panel immediately. We need the exterior refuse container opened. Priority 1. As he spoke, the main cabin door opened again. This time, a man in a sharp suit stepped aboard, his face etched with professional concern, holding a tablet. He was Robert Lawson, the FBO manager for Apex Air, responsible for the entire ground operation and client experience. He had been alerted by his team that there was a delay with the Harrison charter and had come personally to investigate. "Mr. Donovan, Captain Mitchell," he said, stepping into the cabin. "Is there a problem?" Marcus turned his gaze on Lawson. "Your employee, Brenda Walsh, has destroyed a priceless piece of scientific equipment belonging to my guest, Miss Williams." He gestured toward Zara. "I trust Apex Air will take full and immediate responsibility for this catastrophe." Lawson's professional smile vanished instantly. His eyes flicked to Brenda, who had emerged from the cockpit and now stood frozen near the galley, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. This was a nightmare. An absolute nightmare. The Donovan Foundation was one of Apex Air's most prestigious accounts. A formal complaint from Marcus Donovan could have devastating financial and reputational repercussions. Miss Walsh Lawson said, his voice dangerously low. "Step into the forward galley with me. Now." Robert Lawson led Brenda Walsh into the narrow forward galley, away from the passengers but still within view of the cockpit and Lily Martinez, who stood trembling at the back of the plane. The conversation that followed was quiet, but its intensity was palpable. Lawson's face was a mask of controlled fury. Brenda's was a torrent of desperate excuses. It was a safety issue, Brenda said, her voice frantic. The passenger was refusing to stow an oversized bag. She was being unruly, uncooperative. "I thought it was just a student's backpack, something she picked up at a thrift store." Lawson held up a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. His eyes were cold, his jaw tight. "Brenda, I don't care if you thought it was a bag of rocks. You threw a passenger's property into the trash. There is no protocol, no rule, no possible justification for that action. Ever." He swiped a finger across his tablet, pulling up a file. His expression darkened further as he read. "I'm looking at your employment record, Brenda. This isn't the first time you've had issues with passengers, is it?" Brenda's heart plummeted into her stomach. "There have been minor complaints," she stammered weakly. "Misunderstandings. Nothing serious." Minor Lawson scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's see. 3 years ago, a formal complaint from a family traveling from Dubai. You made condescending remarks about their traditional attire and allegedly misplaced a gift bag containing a valuable watch. The family claimed it was deliberate. Apex Air settled out of court for $60,000 to avoid a lawsuit." Brenda opened her mouth to protest, but Lawson continued, his voice gaining momentum like a prosecution building a case. 2 years ago, an official written warning placed in your file for inappropriate and discriminatory language toward a Nigerian businessman and his family. The complaint stated you questioned whether they could afford the charter and made comments about their accents. Last year, another formal complaint. This one from a Grammy-winning musician's management team. His background singers, all women of color, reported that you were hostile, dismissive, and made them feel unwelcome. The musician threatened to blacklist Apex Air unless we took action. We gave you a final warning. Each word was a nail in the coffin of Brenda's career. Each incident a piece of damning evidence. She had always managed to talk her way out of them before to frame the complaints as exaggerations or cultural misunderstandings. But now, in the glaring light of this catastrophic error, those past incidents formed an undeniable pattern. A pattern of prejudice. A pattern of deciding who belonged and who didn't based on skin color, appearance, and her own narrow assumptions. I didn't mean... Brenda had no defense. The evidence was right there on Lawson's screen, a digital record of her failures. Apex Air has a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, Lawson said, his voice flat and final. You are not just a liability, Brenda. You are a walking lawsuit waiting to happen. And as of this moment, you are suspended pending a full investigation. He closed the file on his tablet with a decisive tap. Though I assure you the investigation will be swift and its conclusion inevitable. You will not be flying today, and if I have anything to do with it, you will never fly with this airline again. He turned away from her. His decision made his patience exhausted. Brenda stood alone in the galley, the polished surfaces around her reflecting her stricken face. The world she had so carefully constructed, the status, the authority, the power she derived from controlling access to this exclusive realm was crumbling around her. The sounds from outside grew louder. The rumble of a service vehicle approaching. The shouts of ground crew members mobilizing. They were coming to retrieve the backpack. They were also coming to escort her off the aircraft. Captain Mitchell had stepped out of the cockpit and now approached Marcus Donovan. The maintenance crew is here, sir, he said respectfully. They're opening the refuse container now. and Mr. Lawson has assured me that Miss Walsh's employment is being terminated effective immediately." Marcus gave a curt nod, but his attention wasn't on Brenda Walsh's fate. It was on Zara, who sat in her seat, arms wrapped around herself, her face a mask of grief and exhaustion. He walked over and knelt beside her again. "They're getting it back, Zara," he said softly. "It's going to be okay." Just then, a ground crew member appeared at the door, carefully holding the scuffed black backpack. It was slightly compressed, the fabric wrinkled from being jammed into the refuse container, but it was intact. The beaded lizard keychain still dangled from the zipper. The crew member handed it to Marcus, who in turn passed it to Zara with both hands as if it were the most precious object in the world. Zara clutched it to her chest, a wave of profound relief washing over her so powerfully that she felt lightheaded. Her hands were shaking as she unzipped the main compartment. Inside, the custom foam padding was slightly dented, compressed from the pressure. But the interconnected cylinders that housed BioWave, the delicate glass tubes filled with the bioengineered microorganisms, were unbroken. She pulled out one of the cylinders and held it up to the light. The pale green liquid inside swirled gently. The microorganisms were still alive. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's okay. They're alive." Elena let out a sob of relief. Connor dropped his head into his hands, overwhelmed. Marcus squeezed Zara's shoulder. "I told you," he said gently. "It's going to be okay." But the moment of relief was interrupted by the arrival of 2 airport security officers. They stepped onto the plane, their faces impassive and professional, and walked past Zara without a glance. They stopped in front of Brenda Walsh, who stood in the galley like a ghost, her face drained of color. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, his voice polite but firm. "Will you come with us, please?" Brenda looked at him, then at Lawson, then at Marcus, and finally at Zara. The young black woman she had dismissed. The scientist she had judged. The person she had tried to discard. Zara met her eyes. There was no triumph in Zara's gaze, no smugness, just exhaustion and quiet dignity. Brenda opened her mouth as if to say something. An apology, perhaps, an explanation. But no words came out. What could she possibly say that would undo what she had done? Without a word, she allowed the security officers to escort her off the plane. She walked past Captain Mitchell, who looked away in disappointment. Past Lawson, who was already on his phone arranging for a replacement crew member. Past Lily, who watched with wide, horrified eyes, and past the 3 young scientists whose lives she had tried to destroy. She didn't look back. There was nothing left to look back at. As Brenda stepped onto the jet bridge, Lily Martinez finally found her voice. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking as she looked at Zara. "I should have said something. I should have stopped her. I was scared." Zara looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I understand," she said quietly. "But you saw what she did. And you stayed silent. That's something you'll have to live with." Lily's face crumpled and she turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. Marcus stood and addressed Captain Mitchell. "Captain, we'd like to proceed with the flight as scheduled if possible. We have a summit to attend." Captain Mitchell nodded. "Absolutely, Mr. Donovan. I'll have a replacement flight attendant here within 30 minutes. In the meantime, please make yourselves comfortable. I'll personally ensure the rest of this flight is flawless." As the captain returned to the cockpit to coordinate the departure, Marcus sat down across from Zara, Connor, and Elena. The 3 of them looked shell-shocked, their faces pale, their hands still trembling from the adrenaline. "What just happened?" Connor said, his voice barely a whisper. Just as Marcus replied simply. Elena shook her head in disbelief. She really thought she could just throw it away. "Throw us away." "She did," Marcus said, because she looked at you and made assumptions. She saw your clothes, your age, your skin color, and decided you didn't belong in her world. She never bothered to ask who you were or what you were carrying. She just decided. He looked at Zara. And she was catastrophically wrong. Zara held the backpack in her lap, her fingers tracing the beaded lizard keychain. "My little sister made this for me," she said softly. "She told me it would bring me good luck, that I was going to change the world." Marcus smiled. She was right. You are going to change the world, Zara. And nothing Brenda Walsh did can stop that. Outside, the ground crew finished securing the luggage compartment. A new flight attendant, a young man named Thomas Rivera, boarded the aircraft with a professional smile and an apologetic demeanor. "Mr. Donovan?" "Miss Williams," he said respectfully. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened. I'm here to ensure the rest of your flight is comfortable. Is there anything I can get for you?" Zara looked up at him. "Is there a secure storage compartment near the cockpit for sensitive equipment?" Thomas nodded immediately. "Absolutely. I'll stow your bag there personally." Zara handed him the backpack, and this time she felt no fear. Thomas took it with care, disappeared into the forward cabin, and returned a moment later with a confirmation. "It's secured, Miss Williams. Temperature controlled and locked." "Thank you," Zara said. As the Gulf Stream finally began to push back from the gate, Zara looked out the window at the terminal. Somewhere inside, Brenda Walsh was being processed by security, her career in ruins, her reputation destroyed. Zara felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a quiet, weary relief that it was over. Connor's live stream had ended, but the clip had already been uploaded to social media. It was spreading like wildfire. Within hours, it would have millions of views. The hashtag #ApexAir scandal would trend globally. Brenda Walsh's name would become synonymous with prejudice and arrogance. But for now, in the quiet cabin of the Gulfstream as the jet taxied toward the runway, Zara Williams closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe. She had survived. BioWave had survived. And in exactly 9 hours, she would step onto a stage in Zurich and change the world. The flight to Zurich was smooth, quiet, and surreal. After the chaos and emotional turmoil of the boarding process, the 9 hours in the air felt almost dreamlike. Thomas Rivera, the replacement flight attendant, moved through the cabin with quiet efficiency and genuine respect. He brought coffee and sandwiches without being asked, checked in periodically without being intrusive, and made it clear through his demeanor that what had happened before would never happen again. Marcus Donovan used the flight time to help Zara Connor and Elena refocus. He pulled out his tablet and walked them through their presentation one more time, offering suggestions, asking probing questions, helping them anticipate what the judges and investors at the summit would want to know. "You've been through hell," Marcus said at one point, looking directly at Zara. "But you can't let what Brenda did define this moment. BioWave is bigger than her ignorance. Your work is bigger than her prejudice. When you step onto that stage tomorrow, you're not a victim. You're a scientist. You're an innovator. You're someone who solved a problem that the world desperately needs solved." Zara nodded, gripping the beaded lizard keychain between her fingers like a talisman. "I won't let her take this from me," she said quietly. "Good," Marcus replied, "because she doesn't deserve that power." Connor had spent the first hour of the flight reviewing the live stream footage, editing it down to a tight 4-minute clip that captured the entire confrontation. Brenda's condescension, Zara's calm attempts to explain, the moment the backpack was thrown away, Marcus's arrival, and the devastating reveal. He uploaded it to YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter with a simple caption, "This is what prejudice looks like. This is what it costs." Within 3 hours, the video had 500,000 views. Within 6 hours, it had passed 2 million. Major news outlets picked it up. Aviation industry blogs dissected it. Social media exploded with outrage. Brenda Walsh's corporate headshot, a polished professional photo from the Apex Air website, was suddenly everywhere. She became a symbol, a cautionary tale. The internet, with its brutal efficiency, labeled her private jet Karen. The comment sections were merciless. She threw away a scientist's life work because of how she looked. This is disgusting. I hope she never works again. This is why representation matters. This woman couldn't imagine that a black woman in plain clothes could be brilliant. Apex Air needs to answer for this. And Apex Air did answer. Swiftly, decisively. By the time the Gulfstream touched down in Zurich, Robert Lawson had already concluded his investigation. The evidence was irrefutable. Connor's video. Lily Martinez's formal statement given under pressure admitting she had witnessed the entire incident and that Brenda's actions were not about safety. Captain Mitchell's report corroborating the timeline, and Brenda's own employment file documenting a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning years. The termination letter was sent via email at 2 a.m. Pacific Time. Brenda Walsh was fired for gross misconduct. Her 2 decades of service meant nothing. Her pension was forfeited. Her flight benefits were revoked. Her name was added to an industry-wide database of terminated employees, effectively blacklisting her from ever working in aviation again. But Marcus Donovan was not finished. He had made a promise in that cabin, a promise that he would ensure Brenda paid the full price for what she had done. And Marcus Donovan was a man who kept his promises. His legal team, a phalanx of the sharpest corporate lawyers in Los Angeles, descended upon Apex Air within 48 hours of the incident. They didn't just file a complaint. They initiated a multi-pronged legal assault. The first lawsuit was filed on behalf of Zara Williams, emotional distress, attempted destruction of intellectual property, and negligence. The value of BioWave wasn't just its insured amount of $2.3 million. Marcus's legal team argued that the prototype's potential future value based on projected licensing deals and partnerships was in the hundreds of millions. The emotional trauma Zara had suffered, documented through Connor's video and witness statements, was quantifiable and severe. The second lawsuit was broader, more damaging. It was a civil rights action against Apex Air, citing a pattern of discriminatory behavior by their staff. Brenda Walsh's documented history became the spearhead of the case. The complaints from the Dubai family, the Nigerian businessman, the musician's entourage, all of it was compiled into a single devastating legal filing. The media coverage was relentless. News outlets ran headlines like Apex Air flight attendant fired after throwing away teen scientist's multi-million-dollar prototype, and private jet company faces discrimination lawsuit after viral video. Apex Air's stock price, a publicly traded entity under a parent hospitality corporation, dropped 3% in a single day. The board of directors convened emergency meetings. Public relations teams scrambled to contain the damage. Within a week, Apex Air offered a settlement. They wanted the lawsuits to go away. They wanted the headlines to stop. They wanted Marcus Donovan's fury to be appeased. The settlement for Zara was substantial, an undisclosed 7-figure amount placed into a trust managed by Marcus for her education and the future development of BioWave. It was enough to ensure that she would never have to worry about funding her research again. The larger settlement with the Donovan Foundation was equally significant. Apex Air agreed to implement company-wide mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, from pilots to ground crew to senior management. They revamped their complaint investigation process, creating an independent oversight board to review allegations of discrimination. They issued a public apology signed by the CEO, acknowledging their failure to protect passengers from prejudice. Robert Lawson personally appeared in a video statement. "We failed, Miss Williams," he said, his face somber. "We failed to create a culture where all passengers are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or background. That failure is unacceptable. Failure is We are committed to ensuring it never happens again. The junior flight attendant, Lily Martinez, was required to attend a rigorous retraining program focused on bystander intervention and speaking up against injustice. She kept her job, a decision Marcus quietly supported. She was young, he reasoned, scared, caught in a toxic power dynamic. She deserved a second chance. But for Brenda Walsh, there was no second chance. The financial settlement from Apex Air did not protect her personally. Marcus's lawyers, as promised, filed a separate civil suit directly against her. They argued that her actions were so far outside the scope of her employment, so egregious and malicious, that she bore personal liability. Faced with the prospect of a protracted legal battle she could not afford and could not win, Brenda was forced to settle. The process drained her savings, forced her to sell the Orange County home she had been so proud of, liquidate her retirement accounts. Her career in aviation was over. Her reputation was in ruins. Her finances were devastated. She took a job as a cashier at a high-end grocery store in a neighboring town, hoping no one would recognize her. But one afternoon, a woman in the checkout line stared at her brow furrowed in recognition. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" the woman asked. "You're that flight attendant from the news, aren't you? The one who threw away the scientist's project?" The shame was a physical burning thing. Brenda couldn't answer, couldn't defend herself. She simply scanned the woman's groceries in silence, her hands trembling. That night alone in her small rented apartment, a stark contrast to the spacious home she had lost. Brenda stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back at her was older, tired, defeated. She had thrown away a backpack. And in doing so, she had thrown away her own life. The aviation industry, surprisingly small and interconnected, whispered her name in crew lounges from Teterboro to Dubai. Her story became a case study in training programs, a cautionary tale about the cost of prejudice. No airline would touch her. No charter company would consider her application. She was blacklisted, a pariah, and the hard karma went deeper than finances or career. It struck at the very core of her identity. Brenda had built her entire self-worth on the foundation of her job. She was the senior flight attendant, the gatekeeper of an exclusive world. She drew her power from looking down on others, from deciding who belonged and who didn't. Now she was the one being looked down upon, the one being judged, the one who didn't belong, and there was no one to blame but herself. 3 months after the incident, Brenda Walsh sat in a mandatory court-ordered counseling session, part of the terms of her settlement agreement. The therapist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, asked her a simple question. "Do you understand what you did wrong?" Brenda had prepared an answer. She had rehearsed it in her mind countless times. "I made a mistake," she said carefully. "I acted impulsively. I should have listened to the passengers' concerns." The therapist tilted her head slightly. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you understand what you did wrong." Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "I threw away her bag." "I shouldn't have done that." "Why did you throw it away?" Brenda hesitated. Because she was refusing to follow instructions. Because she was delaying the flight. The therapist wrote something in her notebook. "Did you know what was in the bag?" "No," Brenda admitted. "Did you ask silence? Did you consider even for a moment that the young woman standing in front of you might have been telling the truth when she said the bag was important?" More silence. "Or did you look at her and decide, based on how she looked, that she couldn't possibly belong in that space, that her bag couldn't possibly contain anything valuable?" Brenda's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to deny it, wanted to insist that it hadn't been about race or appearance. But she couldn't, because, deep down, she knew the truth. I looked at her. Brenda whispered, her voice breaking. and I saw someone who didn't fit, someone who didn't belong, and I was angry that she was challenging me, that she was making me look bad in front of my crew. The therapist nodded slowly. And when you threw away her bag, what were you really throwing away? Brenda covered her face with her hands. I don't know. I think you do. And in that moment, sitting in the small, sterile office with its generic motivational posters and neutral-toned furniture, Brenda finally understood. She hadn't just thrown away a backpack. She had thrown away Zara's dignity, her dreams, her trust in a world that was supposed to protect her. And in doing so, Brenda had thrown away her own humanity. I can't take it back, Brenda said, her voice barely audible. I can't undo what I did. No, the therapist agreed. You can't. But you can choose what you do with the consequences. You can choose to learn from this, to become someone different. Brenda nodded, but the words felt hollow. She had lost everything. Her career, her home, her reputation, her sense of self. How do you come back from that? How do you rebuild when the entire world knows your name and associates it with cruelty and prejudice? She didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, the viral video continued to circulate. It had been viewed over 15 million times. It had been dissected on talk shows, referenced in op-eds, shared in diversity training seminars. Brenda's face was frozen in that moment of contempt forever captured, throwing away someone's dream. She had become a symbol, not of redemption, not of second chances, but of what happens when prejudice is allowed to flourish unchecked, when people in positions of power abuse that power, when assumptions become actions and actions have consequences. Brenda Walsh had wanted to maintain order, to enforce standards, to protect the exclusive world she had spent 2 decades serving. But in reality, she had been protecting nothing but her own narrow worldview, her own insecurities, her own need to feel superior, and it had cost her everything. One evening, 6 months after the incident, Brenda received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, the envelope simple and unadorned. She didn't recognize the return address. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Miss Walsh, you don't know me, but I was on that plane. I watched what you did. I saw how you looked at Zara Williams. I saw the contempt in your eyes. I heard the dismissal in your voice. I've thought about that moment every day since, because I realized I've done the same thing. Not with a backpack, but with assumptions, with judgments, with decisions about who belongs and who doesn't. Your story taught me something important. It taught me that our biases don't just hurt others, they destroy us. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if it will matter. But I wanted you to know that what happened on that plane changed me. I hope somehow it changes you too. A witness. Brenda read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. She didn't know if she could change. Didn't know if redemption was possible for someone whose worst moment had been broadcast to the world. But for the first time in months, she felt something other than shame. She felt the faintest glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be better. Even if the world never forgave her, perhaps she could learn to forgive herself. But that was a journey that would take years, and it was one she would have to walk alone. The Global Innovation Summit in Zurich was everything Zara had dreamed of and more. The venue was a stunning modern convention center overlooking Lake Geneva, its glass walls offering breathtaking views of the Swiss Alps. For 3 days, Zara, Connor, and Elena were immersed in a world of breathtaking ideas and brilliant minds. They saw projects ranging from AI-powered medical diagnostics to revolutionary carbon capture systems. They met young innovators from Nigeria, India, Brazil, South Korea, and dozens of other countries. They were surrounded by their peers, passionate, dedicated people who believed, as Zara did, that science could change the world. The incident on the plane began to feel distant, like a bad dream from another life. Marcus had been right. BioWave was bigger than Brenda's ignorance. Her work was bigger than one person's prejudice. On the final day of the summit, it was their turn to present. As Zara walked onto the main stage, a massive auditorium filled with scientists, investors, policymakers, and journalists, she felt a flicker of the old fear. The memory of standing in that jet cabin watching her backpack disappear into the trash chute tried to resurface. But then she looked at the front row where Marcus sat, giving her a small, encouraging nod. She looked at Connor and Elena standing by the presentation screen, their faces filled with nervous excitement. And she thought about her little sister's beaded lizard keychain now safely attached to her belt loop. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "Good afternoon. My name is Zara Williams, and I'm here to talk to you about water." The audience leaned forward. More specifically, I'm here to talk about the 2.2 billion people on this planet who don't have access to clean drinking water. About the communities where children walk miles every day to collect water that will make them sick. About the rivers and lakes choked with pollutants that we've decided are too expensive or too difficult to clean. She clicked to the next slide, showing an image of the polluted river near her childhood home in Oakland. "I grew up next to this river. When I was 8 years old, I watched a family of ducks die because the water they swam in was filled with chemicals from a nearby factory. And I asked my mother why no one was fixing it. She told me it was complicated, that cleaning water on that scale was too hard, too costly. I decided I didn't accept that answer." The audience was silent, captivated. BioWave is a water purification system using bioengineered microorganisms that break down pollutants at a molecular level. It's scalable, sustainable, and cost-effective. Our prototype can purify 1,000 liters of contaminated water per day using nothing but sunlight and a nutrient solution that costs less than $5 to produce. She showed videos of the system and action graphs demonstrating its efficiency testimonials from environmental scientists who had reviewed her research. But this isn't just about the science, Zara continued. It's about access. It's about refusing to accept that clean water is a luxury instead of a right. She paused, her voice growing quieter but more intense. This project was almost lost on the way here. It was discarded because someone looked at my backpack and decided it and I were worthless. But I'm standing here today because I refused to let go. Because I held on to my dream even when someone with power tried to throw it away. The auditorium erupted in applause. Zara hadn't named Brenda, hadn't mentioned the viral video, but many in the audience knew the story, and they understood the subtext. "Let this be a lesson," Zara said, her voice strong and clear. "Value is not determined by appearance. Brilliance is not confined to boardrooms or Ivy League labs. The future is in the hands of dreamers everywhere, in the backpacks of students, in the notebooks of young scientists who refuse to accept the world as it is. Don't ever, ever underestimate them." The standing ovation was thunderous. It lasted for 3 full minutes. People weren't just applauding her science. They were applauding her resilience, her courage, her refusal to be diminished. That evening, the awards ceremony was held at a gala dinner overlooking the lake. The tension was palpable as the presenter, a Nobel laureate in chemistry, took the stage to announce the winner of the coveted Global Innovator of the Year award. The award came with a $500,000 research grant and a partnership with a leading environmental technology firm. For its scientific ingenuity, its potential for global impact, and the sheer passion of its creators, the presenter announced the 2025 Global Innovator of the Year award goes to BioWave. The world exploded in light and sound. Zara, Connor, and Elena found themselves in a joyous, tearful group hug. They had done it. Against all odds, through trauma and adversity, they had actually done it. Standing at the podium to accept the award, Zara held the crystal trophy in her hands and looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you," she said, her voice echoing through the grand hall. This award isn't just for me or my team. It's for every young person who has ever been made to feel small, who has had their ideas dismissed, who has been judged not by the content of their mind, but by the color of their skin or the clothes they wear. Her voice was unwavering, powerful. My project was called Trash, but trash is just something someone didn't recognize the value of. I'm here to prove them wrong, to prove that the future belongs to the ones who refuse to be discarded. The ovation was even louder than before. In that moment, Zara Williams was no longer just a brilliant young scientist. She was a leader, a symbol, a voice for everyone who had ever been underestimated. 6 months later, BioWave moved from prototype to pilot program. Zara used the settlement money and the prize funding to establish the Donovan Williams Foundation, an organization dedicated to funding and mentoring underrepresented young scientists. Connor became the technical director. Elena became the head of research partnerships. And Marcus remained Zara's mentor and champion, guiding her through the complex world of licensing deals and corporate partnerships. The first pilot program was installed in Zara's hometown of Oakland, purifying the very river where she had watched those ducks die 15 years earlier. The ceremony was attended by local officials, environmental advocates, and dozens of young students who saw in Zara a reflection of their own potential. Brenda Walsh's name became a case study in aviation training programs across the industry, a cautionary tale about how prejudice destroys careers and lives. She worked her cashier job in quiet anonymity, her former world of private jets and exclusive terminals now an unreachable memory. The shame followed her everywhere. When recognized, she could only lower her eyes and continue scanning groceries, her hands trembling with the weight of what she had lost. The moment Brenda threw that backpack away, she didn't just discard a bag. She discarded her own future. She chose to see a problem instead of a person. She chose contempt over curiosity. And that choice cost her everything: her career, her home, her reputation, her sense of self. It was a price she would pay for the rest of her life. Zara's story isn't just about karma. It's about resilience. She faced dismissal at the highest level and didn't just survive, she soared. She proved that brilliance doesn't need permission. It needs protection. And when the world tries to throw you away, you hold on tighter. You refuse to let go. You stand your ground and prove them catastrophically wrong. Here's what I learned from Zara's story. Never let someone else's blindness dim your vision. Brenda looked at Zara and saw what she expected a young black woman who didn't belong. She never bothered to look deeper. And that failure of imagination destroyed her. If you've ever been underestimated, judged before you walked in the room, dismissed because you didn't fit someone's narrow idea of worthy, this story is your reminder. Your worth isn't determined by who recognizes it. It's determined by what you create, what you contribute, what you refuse to let go of. Zara held on to that backpack when it would have been easier to give in. She held on to her dream when someone with power tried to trash it. And because she refused to let go, she changed the world. To anyone watching, don't let the Brendas of the world make you doubt yourself. Hold tight to your backpack. Protect your dream. And when they try to throw you away, stand your ground. Because the people who underestimate you today will be the ones who have to watch you succeed tomorrow. If this story moved you, share it. Comment your own story of being underestimated below. Hit that subscribe button. And remember, the future belongs to the ones who refuse to be discarded.